Hi guys, I hope you're all doing well. In today's video, I will be solving the CIE A level paper 1 for May-June 2021. This is variant 2 which I'm solving, but I believe there's not much of a difference between the variants. So yeah, let's get started off with things. The first question is about the databases. Let's read what it says. It says that Raj owns houses that other people rent from him. He has a database that stores details about the people who rent houses and the houses they rent. Database house rentals. So that's the name of the database, guys. Remember, has the following structure. We've got a customer table, we've got a house table, we've got a rental table, and each of them they have their primary key, fields, so on and so forth. Let's go on and have a look at what the first question says. So it says, give the definition of the following database terms. Use an example from the database house rentals. Well, seems like a pretty straightforward question. A field is basically what? An attribute slash column in the table is a field. So as you should know this already, I believe that basically what we have is, for example, we can actually have so many examples. For example, first name in the customer table, etc., etc. So, for your knowledge, of course, the point is that let's say this customer table has all of these are the fields, all of them, all of my attributes, all of these things which I have are the fields. And this is essentially like, in a table when we have the column name, technically a field is basically your column name. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, the next thing it says, what is an entity? Well, an entity is basically anything that we can store information about. So we'd say that an entity is anything that we can store information about. For example, over here we can have a look at least three things. For example, customer, house, and probably it could be rent, so on and so forth, etc., etc. So anything that we can actually store information about. And usually what we do is that we try to create separate tables for each of the entities, keeping in mind obviously our normalization and everything, which is something we'll maybe talk about later on. But anyway, that's what an entity is. Finally, foreign key. Well, what is a foreign key? Well, I hope you guys remember. Basically, a foreign key is what? It's the primary primary key of one table that links with the other table, acting as a foreign key. So guys, a foreign key is essentially utilized in order to form links between our databases. When we have, in database, when we have different tables, right, we've got to link them together. So how we do that? We do that using foreign keys. And there are so many examples. For example, have a look at this. This customer ID is the primary key of the customer table, right? But if I have a look at the rental table, it acts as a normal field. So what's going to happen is that is essentially this is going to link over here. So in order to basically link my rental table with my customer table, what I'll do is I'll actually include the customer ID field in my rental table. So now this will actually do what is that this is actually going to cause the customer ID to be the foreign key in your rental table. So we can give this example over here, and that is that customer ID in rental. And there's another foreign key rental, and that is the house ID. The house ID. So the house table will be linked in the rental using my house ID. So this is what a foreign key is. Okay, now moving on, it says tick to identify if the house rentals is in 3NF, third normal form. Well, It is in 3NF. What's the reason for that? Well, the reason for that is pretty simple. Now, see, when we talk about the third normal form, what we say that whenever we have to check if a particular database or if a particular table is in third normal form, what we've got to verify, we've got to check that there must not be any transitive dependency. When I say transitive dependency, that basically means that all my fields, they must be fully dependent on my primary key. Okay, now how do we identify that? Well, very simply, we can just have a look at something and see if one particular thing is depending on something other than my primary key. So let's have a look at let me just give an example very quickly using the customer table. Now if I have a look at the customer table, I have what? This is my primary key, the customer ID. The remaining fields: first name, last name, date of birth, and email. Well, if I change the customer ID, all of them, they're going to change, right? If I change my first name, will the last name, date of birth, email change? Well, I don't think so. Because the point is that all of them, they are solely dependent on the customer ID. Because why? That's my primary key. Okay, if I change my first name, let's say initially the first name was, let me just say John Smith. Let me just make it, I don't know, 6 7 2022. I don't know, something like that. Let me make an email: xyz@gmail.com, so on and so forth. And let's say the customer ID is 1475. Now see guys, the thing is that, observe this, because this is my primary key, right? So if I change this, if I change 1457, if I make it, let's say I make it 1489, so my whole field is going to change. The whole record, sorry, is going to change. So all the fields will change because I'm probably going to have some other record at 1489 customer ID. But the point is, let's say if I just change this, if I change John and make it, I don't know, just make it Raj. Okay, this doesn't matter. Okay, it will not change the last name, it will not change the date of birth, it will not change the email, unless of course I'm making a new record out of it or I'm actually changing it. So John Smith will be 1475, but Raj, let's say Ali, Raj Ali is probably going to be some other customer ID. So that is why I can observe, and that's exactly the same thing which is also true for the remaining of my tables as well. So very simply, I can say that yes, it is in third normal form. The reason for this being the fact that because all the attributes are dependent only on the primary key. For example, for example, in the customer table and what was the name of the other table? Let me just go back quickly. In the house table. For example, in the customer table and the house table, all attributes are dependent solely on the primary keys of the tables. So essentially, there are no transitive dependency. Now, what was transitive dependency? That one field should not be dependent on some other field which is not your primary key. So as I just explained, that my last name should not be dependent on the first name, my date of birth should not be dependent on the last name, so on and so forth. All of this should change, all of this should be dependent solely on the customer ID. All right, so it says complete the following DDL. Well, I think this is pretty simple. Example data, we've got to define the table. So common sense, I need to do what? I need to say create table. And what will be the name of the table? The name of the table is renter. What do I need to do? I need to do house ID. Well, house ID is going to be what? Remember, it is going to be a string, of course, because house ID essentially is not going to be, I don't know, some numbers. It could be possibly a string. Why? Because see, we've got variable, oh, sorry, we've got uh, integers as well as alphabets in this. So simply we'll have this as your varchar, remember, which is variable character. Monthly cost, guys, cannot be an integer. Do not make this mistake, please. Observe. If let's say the monthly cost was written as, I don't know, 1,687, so on and so forth, then maybe we could have said that it's an integer. But usually always remember that preferably we try to make this as a real. Reason for this being very simply the fact that if it is because see, whenever we're talking about costs or something, there's a very fair chance that the costs might be like, I don't know, 4.5, 6.7, 8.9, so on and so forth, something along those lines. So always preferable to have it as your real, which is float, which means which allows your decimal points as well. And obviously it says, and you guys should remember this, that we obviously need to have a primary key in each of our tables. So the last is going to be my primary key. And how do I know this? Well, I also know this because of the fact that, see, on top, I know that in my rental, my primary key is the rental ID. So makes the process pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Okay, now it says write a DML, data manipulation language. Remember, guys, very quickly for your knowledge, data definition and data manipulation. Data definition means when you're defining something, okay, when you've got to create something, and manipulation, of course, means when you've got to manipulate it. Again, it's simple English, no rocket science. And manipulation essentially means what? If I have to fetch something, if I have to delete something, if I have to get a record, so on and so forth, that's all what I'm manipulating the database. Okay, now it says that return the first name and last name of all customers who have not paid their deposit. Well, very quickly, for the sake of this, let's just actually try to. I mean, if I go back, I need to do what? It says that I've got to figure out. I need the first names and last names of all customers who have not paid their deposit, who have not paid their deposit. So if you think about it, I need the first name and the last name, right? Of who? Of all the customers who have not paid their deposit, right? So that is basically means that what will I need? That essentially means that I need to get, just a sec. Okay, yeah. So what I need to get is that I need to go on and I need to get the first names and last names of all the customers, okay, who have not paid the deposit. Okay, who have not paid the deposit. So what will we do? Well, I'm very simply going to, that essentially means that I need to use two tables, the customer table and the rental table. Why? Because of course they will be linked together. So let's see, it says so I need what? So let's go back and let's have a look at the our general language that we have for DML. So I'll say select, okay, and of course select should include the field names. I'll say from, okay, it means which tables I should use, where. All right. So select means that what do I need to select? Now I know very straightforwardly that what I essentially need to select is the first name and the last name. Let me just quickly have a look at the field names exactly. So yeah, it's first name, last name. So we'll use this exact fields. So it's first name, comma, last name. Okay, from where? I need to select this from which particular table? I need to go on and select this from the customer table. And remember, I told you that we will need to link the customer as well as the rental table. Why? Because of course there, because see, I need to have the fields from the customer table, but my condition is essentially based on the rental table. So for that purpose, I'll need to link both of them. So I'll need to use my customer table, comma rental, which means I'll need to join both of them. I'll need to use both of them. Now the condition is where, again, it says who have not paid their deposit. So I'll say where deposit paid equals no. Do I need to have any other condition? I need to. Remember, whenever we are linking two of them together, we need to have an and condition. So I'll say and